Shabbat Shalom, happy Sabbath. The Queen of Sheba and the gold of Ophir. The Queen of Sheba and the gold of Ophir. That's a subject today that we want to look at. As such, I will ask you to join me in the book of Bereshit, chapter 2. This is the third consecutive week that I will be reading this passage, because I believe there is nuggets of gold in this passage that perhaps we have overlooked in the past. So come with me to Bereshit chapter 2, and we will begin at verse 8. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden in Eden to the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yahweh Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, with the tree of the life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 river heads. The name of the first was Pison. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Ahila, or Havilah in some scriptures, where there is gold. Don't miss that point. And the gold of that land is good. Bdellium is there, and Shosham stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Iddakel. It is one which goes towards the east of Ashur, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. Last time we focused mainly on the river Gihon and Ethiopia. This time we want to deal with that land, Havilah. And also we would like to implicate Ethiopia in this, so that it will give context to that which we aim to research today. So as I read the word of Yah, quite glaringly, it seems to me that many have not earned the right to render a view on a subject that has engendered much conjectures. The very enigma of Ophir and its prodigious treasures of gold have induced me to go on a search, whereas in earlier times I might have been more inclined to accept the receive teachings of other people. And so, as I look at the subject, we are made to understand that this land of gold, the wealth that was amassed from it by King David and King Solomon, was such that it made them royal exchequers of Israel's kingdom. In fact, we can hardly quantify the elaborate disbursement of treasures recorded between the beginning of David's reign and the end of Solomon's reign. We can't. Never have we seen such wealth anywhere else. In today's evaluation, it would be billions of dollars. And so we want to look at that. And so perhaps nothing can be more plausible than the account provided by the Kibra, which we looked at some weeks ago. And it deals with the voyage of the Queen of Sheba, the sovereigness. Sheba went to meet King Solomon in Jerusalem. And so, in my search for that place mentioned in chapter 2, Ophir, where that gold is, that land where the gold is, I must confess that it has taken me much more than the time it took Solomon to send his navy there, which was 3 years. But I must thank Yah that I was able to finish my destination and find the place Ophir. So I want you to join me in the book of Melakim, Aleph, that's 1 Kings, chapter 10, as was read earlier for us. And the word says, and the sovereigness of Sheba, the queen of Sheba, heard of the report of Shelemah, that's Solomon, concerning the name of Yahweh, and came to try him with hard questions. And she came to Jerusalem with a very great company, with camels that bore spices, very much gold, and precious stones. And she came to Solomon, and she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. And Solomon answered all her questions. There was no matter hidden for the sovereign that he did not make known to her. And the sovereigness of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the house that he built, and the food on his table. It was not a casual visit. It was purposeful. And the seat of his servants, and the service of his waiters, and the attire, and his cupbearers, and his ascending offerings, which he offered in the house of Yahweh. Now, if someone came to your house and made such notes of what you had, perhaps you would say you ought to have been minding your own business. But the sovereigness here, she took note of all that she saw. And the word says, when she saw that, there was no more spirit in her. She was struck. She was amazed at the opulence, the wealth of Solomon, the sumptuous tables that was spread, and the way he treated his servants, the clothes that they wore, and the service. Then she said to the sovereign, the word I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom was true. But I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes, and see, I have not been told half of it. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the report which I heard. She said, I heard the report in my own country. And when I heard it, I could not bring myself to believe what I heard. Because never have I heard such story about another human being. Wealth, wisdom. And I decided then I had to meet you. And now that I'm here, I realize that half the story that I heard was never told to me. It is more than I expected. And she said, blessed are your men, and blessed are these your servants. And the word says here in verse 10, and she gave the sovereign 120 talents of gold, very many spices, and precious stones. Never again did so many spices come as the sovereigness of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Notice something here. She watched. She took note. She saw his service. And perhaps when we read this, we might conjecture that she gave Solomon the money, the gold. But the gold that she gave him was for the temple. Because he was building a temple, and Solomon was in fact trading with her prior to this. Because she's from Ophir, where the gold is. And the word says that Solomon would send his navy to Ophir, and the return journey would take 3 years. It would take 3 years. And so when you read that, you must begin to think. Because this elusive Ophir, scholars and theologians and others have sought to identify Ophir where the gold is. Some have said it is in Africa. Some say Sri Lanka. Some say India. Some have even said America. And so it is part of our duty to check everything. We must stay en route of the scriptures to ascertain where this queen really came from, where she came from. Now, come with me to chapter 9 of Melakim. And I want to read from verse 25. We've got to understand that prior to them putting chapters and verses in the Bible, there was no chapters. So chapter 9 and chapter 10 would be one reading. But I want to read from verse 25 of chapter 9. It says, and 3 times a year, Solomon brought ascending offerings and peace offering on the slaughtering place which he had built for Yahweh, and he burned incense with that which was before Yahweh, thus gave completeness to the house. And sovereign Solomon built a fleet of ships at Eston Geba, which is near Eliot, on the shore of the Sea of Reeds. Some Bible says the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. And Aram sent his navy with the fleet seamen who knew the sea to work with the servants of Solomon, and they went to Ophir. Are you with me? They went to Ophir and took 420 talents of gold for there and brought it to the sovereign Shalaman. Now that's chapter 25. But if there were no chapter, you would see in chapter 10 here, and when the queen of Sheba heard, where did she hear? She already told us. She said, when I heard it in my own land, she was in the land of Ophir. That's where she lived. That's what the queen said. When I heard it in my own land, who did she hear it from? It's clear who she heard it from. She heard it from the men who Solomon sent, his navy and Hiram. She heard it from them. That's what the word wants us to know. And she said, when I heard it, I decided that I had to visit you. So, the Queen of Sheba and the place of Ophir, which is laden with gold. It's laden with gold. And it's not just an ordinary bulk of gold. It is the best gold on the planet. The best gold. And I just want to read what Torbit said about this gold. The word here is Torbit. And I'm reading from chapter 13 of Torbit. And I'm reading from the King James Bible, an ancient one. And it has the book in there of Torbit. So I'm reading from verse 15. It says, let my soul bless Yah, the great King, for Jerusalem shall be built up with sapphires and emeralds and precious stone. We're talking about a new Jerusalem here. Thy walls and towers and battlements with pure gold, and the streets of Jerusalem shall be paved with beryl and carbuncle and stones of Ophir. He says that the new Jerusalem, the gold that will be used to furnish it, will come from Ophir. Verse 18, and all her streets shall say, Hallelujah. And they shall praise him, saying, blessed be Yah, which hath extolled it forever. So it's a kind of gold that is interesting. It is pure. And so we want to find where this gold is. When we anglicize the word, we say Ophir. But it's really Auphyr. An A, the first letter, Aleph in the Hebrew. And so it is the A, not the O. We've got to understand that. And there is a U in it. So we would spell it differently from the King James translation. We would spell it A-U-P-H-Y-R, or we could spell it A-U-P-I-R, but you would have A-U. So when you look at it and break it down, you will see the AU in the spelling of Ophir is the symbol of gold, AU. And so when the word tells you that there is gold there, we see the correct spelling, AUPHYR. It is the chemical symbol of gold. But we have not understood that. And so when the word in Genesis chapter 2 says, in that land there is good gold. And you've got to understand that many explorers have read this and have understood this and have sought to find where Ophir was. Not least among them was Christopher Columbus. He was on his way to Ophir when he found America. In fact, when he got to Haiti at one time, he found some gold and he thought that was Ophir. And so the search continues for Ophir. We've got to understand that. And so people have conjectured and have deposited many guesses as to where Ophir is. But I want to bring you to Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Because Yeshua made reference to that place. He made reference to that place that we call Ophir. And I will look at verses 38 reading on. Then some of the scribes of the Pharisees answered, saying, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. Now that's quite interesting because they had seen so many signs. In fact, they had seen that he healed a dumb and deaf man. They had seen that he healed a man suffering from leprosy. They have seen that. And they had seen that he had healed a man born blind, which we dealt with last week. So these are the three messianic prophecies that they've seen, miracles that he performed. They knew that, and they're still asking him for a sign. We want to see a sign. But in answering, he said, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Come with me to verse 41. Men of Nineveh shall stand up in the judgment with the generation and condemn it, because they repented of the preaching of Jonah. That's Jonah. And look, a greater than Jonah is here. Then verse 42, the sovereignest of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and look, a greater than Solomon is here. Are you with me? So listen to what Yeshua says. Yeshua says, the queen of the south came to Jerusalem seeking wisdom, seeking answers to her question. She came from the end of the earth. So if Yeshua says she came from the end of the earth, we must conclude that it can't be Africa. It cannot be. Are you with me? It cannot be Sri Lanka. It cannot be India. We know that to travel from Israel to Ethiopia would take a few weeks in that time. The word says this journey of Solomon's navy took 3 years round trip. It has to be a longer journey. It has to be. And so scholars and explorers and sailors, mariners have sought to find this place we call Ophir. Because, you know, the greed of this land, they would like to find that gold. And interestingly, some of the people there don't even know that they have the gold. And we've got to understand what is indeed happening. Yeshua said she came from the end of the earth. So it can't be just around the corner. Can't be. It has to be somewhere else. And what's interesting, in my journey to find Ophir in the word, as I indicated, it's taken me much longer than Solomon. Solomon did not have to search for it. He knew because the word said he had a navy on that sea. And he had Hiram helping him. And he would send them to Ophir to bring back gold. And that's why Solomon became the billionaire that he was. And what I'm finding out is that Ophir is no other place than that which we call the what? Archipelago that is in that place we call the Philippines. And you say, the Philippines? I say, yes, the Philippines. The Philippine archipelago, it comprises well over 7,000 islands, clustered in 3 major island groups. And so this morning, perhaps you were wondering, why did we sing, "We 3 kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we have traveled afar"? You probably wondering, thinking, why are they singing carol when that song was written by John Hopkins way back in the 19th century? It wasn't a carol. He knew the scriptures. He knew. And he knew what he was saying, because those islands, they comprise, 3 major ones: Ophir, Sheba, and Tarshish. Are you with me? Those are the 3 major islands. And so they are in the Philippines archipelago. That's where the gold is. And if we're correct in our assumption, that's where the Garden of Eden was. That's where Adam lived. Now, that's breaking news for some, but it's been in the word for a long time. And I think King David, that is, knew very well where it was, because Well, let's go to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. Let's go to Matthew chapter 2 and see what we can glean from Matthew chapter 2. The word says that when Yeshua was born, it says, now when Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came what? Magi from the east of Jerusalem. Now, when you read that, you get the impression that they're talking about magicians. But the word here is magos, meaning they're scientists from the east. Are you with me? They are not, when we use Western interpretation, it says magi's. And here's what they say. They're saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star. We have what? We have seen his star, and we have come. And with what? We have come to, they didn't come to work magic. They have come to worship him. So when the writer of We Three Kings wrote, he understood this. These were not astrologers that came. Because if we read in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 20, we see there when John saw the star, they were told, the star, the seventh star, these are angels. What these kings want you to know, they saw an angel, a star. And notice, stars are fixed, usually. This star moved and directed them to Jerusalem. And because the journey is at the end of the world, it said it took 2 years, isn't it not? That's how far it is. If this was in Africa, it would not have taken that long. But it was in Ophir and Tarshish and Sheba they're traveling from. And let's read. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where the Messiah would be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Yehudi, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the cities of Judah, for out of thee shall come forth unto me that shall rule my people Israel. He's quoting Micah 5 and verse 2. And so the word here is, these men brought gifts. And in our Western minds, we're told, what did they bring? What did they bring? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's what they told us. We understand the gold. Frankincense? That's really not the word. The Franks, they did not migrate to France until the 3rd century AD. Yeshua lived 300 years before that. So the word frankincense was not, frankincense, I should say, was not there in the beginning. Wasn't there. That's French. Wasn't there. And myrrh. We know that myrrh is that, what? Comes from the word there, Smyrna, meaning bittersweet. Smyrna. It's an ointment. And that's why from which we get the name Myron. From that name. And they brought gifts. Now, we have concluded, most of us, that there were 3 of them. The Bible doesn't say that. But we sing, "We 3 kings." The writer was not focusing so much on the persons that came, but on the 3 major places that we have in the Philippines. The Orient. Notice what he said, the writer, "We 3 kings of the Orient are bearing gifts. We have traveled afar from the other side of the world." As Yeshua said in Matthew 12 and verse 42. That's where we're coming from. And it's taken us this long to come. But we have come to worship him because the angel, the star, led us all the way to Jerusalem. And it's taken us 2 years. Now, I must make reference, therefore, to Dan Fernandez, who is really a politician in the Philistine. I keep saying the Philistine. In the Philippines, he's a politician. And on July 30th, 2023, he stood up in his parliament, and for over 20 minutes he spoke. And he's letting his parliament know that he has found out that the land where they live, the Philippines, is the land of Ophir. And he is making a motion now to change the name of the Philippines back to Ophir. So the world will know this is the land of gold. This is the land of gold. David well knew this. Come with me to the book of Psalms, Psalm chapter 72, and let us read from verse 10. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles. So when we read in the Bible, we see the isles of the sea. That's what they're talking about. Over 7,000 of them in the sea over there in the Philippines. The isles of the sea shall bring presents. The king of Sheba, the kings of Sheba and Seba shall offer it. This is what David was prophesying, that when the Messiah is born, that which we see in Matthew chapter 2, he's saying they will bring gifts from this place. Yea, all the kings shall fall down before him, all nations shall serve him, for he shall deliver the needy, which he crieth, the poor also, and him that hath no helper. He shall spare the poor and needy, and shall save the souls of the needy. He shall redeem their souls from deceit and violence, and the precious shall their blood be on his side. And he shall live, and to him shall be given the gold of Sheba. There it is. Prayer also shall be made for him continually, and daily shall he be praised. David wrote this and says the gold that will come on the day when he is born will come from Tarshish, and will come from Ophir, and will come from Sheba. There it is. Many years before the Messiah himself. Psalm chapter 72, beginning in verse 10. That's what I just read. So we have to understand what is going on here. Yeshua wants us to know that which we read in the book of Genesis is the land or the archipelago, those islands in the Philippines. And so it is perhaps difficult for some of us to even grasp, but it's littered here in the word that that's where it is. Now, Antonio de Moga Sanchez Garay, who was a Spanish soldier, lawyer, and high-ranking colonial official for 43 years in the Philippines, he wrote when he went to the Philippines, when he went to Ophir, he's telling you how the people dressed when he went there. He says, about their necks, they wear gold necklaces, wrought like spun wax, and with links in our fashion, some larger than others. On their arms, they wear armlets of wrought gold, which they call calumbigas, and which they are very large and made in different pattern. Some wear strings of precious stone, cornelians and agates, and other blue and white stones, which they esteem highly. They wear around the legs some strings of these stones and certain cord covered with black pitch in many folding as garters. Everybody was wearing gold when he went there during that time. And so when the word of Yah is letting us know that this place is the land of gold, not just gold, but gold that is deposited in the earth to be used to furnish the New Jerusalem. And Yah said, I have told you this in Genesis chapter 2, that land gold is precious. He said it's precious. And therefore, this gold, this prodigious gold, is being sought after. The Spanish went there. Columbus was looking for it and ended up all over the place. And then he comes back and he tells the people that he's discovered this. No, he was just looking for gold. And so we have got to understand that they know, the historians, they know that the Philippines is this land, but they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know. Just think. The word is clear that Ophir is that land where the queen of Sheba came from. She said, I heard it from the mariners who came with Solomon's navy. I heard it. Let's read Jeremiah chapter 10 and verse 9. It says, we have taken a new course on the quest for this Ophir. We have. All right? So Jeremiah wants us to know that the country where this gold came from is none other than what? Ophir. Ophir. Let's read Jeremiah 10:9 rather than say it. It's Ophir. Jeremiah 10 and verse 9. Let's read it so that we can understand what's happening. Silver spread in plates is brought from where? Tarshish. And gold from Uphaz, the work of the workman and of the hands of the founder. Blue and purple is their clothing. They are all the works of cunning man. It comes from Tarshish. It comes from Ophir. It comes from Sheba. Now, I think one of the problems that we've had is that we have a Sheba that is from descendants of Ham. But the Sheba that we want is the Sheba that is the descendants of Joktan, who is a descendant of Shem. We read this morning from the book of Jubilees in chapter 8, the land that was given to Shem. Let's read it again. In chapter 8 of the book of Jubilees, it says in verse 30 that the land that was given to Japheth, many of which are now claiming to be Jews, are claiming to be Israelites, it says the land given to them was cold. It's in the north. And as you well know, that many of them were brought back from cold lands over there in Europe and brought back to Israel. Moses says such people are Gentiles, Japheth, descendants of Japheth. He says the land of Ham is hot. We well knew that. That's not breaking news. We know Ham's land is hot. And the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but it is of blended cold and heat. Make sense? So when people are brought back from areas like Siberia and the cold Europe, and you're drilling it into others to make them feel that these are the people, he says, no, not so. Not so. We've just read in Jubilee 8, when all the land in the days of Peleg, when the land was divided, who it was given to. So if the United Nations wants to know who owns Gaza, all they have to go back and do is to read the book of Jubilees. They will see where the borders were at the time when the earth was divided, in the days of Peleg, in the days of Joktan. And so what we are searching for is the Queen of Sheba, meaning the Sheba, the son of Joktan that belongs to Shem. Remember, these are eponyms in that the son is named Sheba, but later on the descendants of this land is now being ruled by the Queen of Sheba. We've got to understand that. So if I were to put a view forward and deposit a view, I would most likely say it seemed to me that Ethiopia and Philippines way back then had some link. Perhaps the Philippines was a colony of Ethiopia. I need to research that a little bit more. But I think we often get mixed up with the Sheba from Ham and the Sheba from Joktan, from Shem. Let's go back to chapter 10 of Kings, Book of Kings, First Kings, that is, because it's important that we understand these things. Let's go to verse 12. Well, that's verse 11 of chapter 10. And the navy also of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stone. Now, almug trees is what we call today sandalwood. It was a wood brought to Israel from the Philippines. And how did she get there? Of course, she came with the navy. Hiram brought her and took her back. That's why she was able to bring all these things. She didn't just come with camel. She didn't ride from Africa. She came from a long way in the navy, and Hiram brought her back, according to what the word is trying to tell us, if we care to read it. And the king made of the almug tree pillars for the house of Yahweh, and for the king's house harps and the psalteries for a singer. There came no such almug trees, nor were seen unto this day. So these are not native trees of Israel. They are from somewhere else, sandalwood. And King Solomon gave unto the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, besides that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servant. Of course, it seemed to me here that she's brought back by Hiram, by the same navy that brought her back. Now, the weight of the gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 606 talents of gold. Let's go to verse 22 of the same passage. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacock. So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom, and all the earth sought to Solomon to hear the wisdom which Elohim had put in his heart. So when we read that, we see clearly where the gold is coming from. So when Yeshua in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 42 says, this same queen from Sheba, will stand up in these last days and condemn us. Why? Because she traveled from Ophir, that being the Philippines, all the way to Jerusalem. Not only that, wise men from that country came to worship the king, one now greater than all the men in the earth, and we won't even come to church on time. He said they will condemn it. We won't even repent. They will condemn it. Notice Yeshua said, the queen of the south came from the uttermost part. And so the question must be asked, is Africa the uttermost part? Is Ethiopia the uttermost part of the earth? You wouldn't conclude that, would you? Is America the uttermost part of the earth? No, you wouldn't conclude that. And all the places, even Haiti is deposited as an idea. It's not the uttermost part. You have to go to the archipelago, where over 700 islands are there in the sea, grouped in three main groups of islands. And the word here seems to be saying to us that where the Garden of Eden was. Let's go back, because I know this may well trouble you in your thinking based on what you have been taught before. Let's go back, chapter 2. It says, a river went out of Eden and watered the garden. I'm reading from verse 7 in the chronological scriptures. And from then it was parted and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pison, that is, which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. That's what we're dealing with. And he tells you in chapter 10 now of Genesis. Let's go there so we can get this thing together. Chapter 10 of Genesis. It says that, let's start from verse 9, talking about Nimrod here. And he was a mighty hunter opposing Yahweh. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter, opposing Yahweh, and the beginning of his reign was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calme in the land of Shinar. Out of that land he went to Assyria and builded Nineveh and the city streets and Calah, and the resin between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. And so we're seeing that all these people of Cush. Verse 21, unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, and Ashu, and Aphaxad, and Lud, and Aram, and the children of Aram, Uz, and Ul, and Getha, and Mash, and Aphaxad begat Selah, and Selah begat Eber. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. There we are. For in his days was the earth divided. So this here in Genesis chapter 10, verse 25, takes us back to the book of Jubilee, chapter 8, when all the land was divided. Verse 26, and Joktan begat Almadad, and Sheleph, and Azamayet, and Jirah, and Odoram, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Obal, and Abimamel, and Sheba. Verse 29, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Jobab, all these were the sons of Joktan. So this is the Sheba we want, that is from Ophir, that belongs to who? Joktan, that is the line of Shem. That's the Sheba we really want to chase. She is the one who came from Ophir, came, and after she questioned Solomon, and Solomon showed her his ministry, the temple. She then gave him money as a gift, as an offering for the temple. She wasn't giving Solomon money. Solomon had everything. It was for the building of the temple. And their dwelling, listen to verse 30, and their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest in Sephar, in the mount of the east. So all of these children of Joktan of Shem, they lived in the far east. That's what we call it, the far east, not in the middle of the east. These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, and their lands, and their nations. And the word said, these are the families of the sons of Noah after their generation in the nation. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So the queen of Sheba, she said, I heard all of this in my land. Where? Ophir. That's where I was. Who told it to me? The mariners that came with Solomon's navy. And when I heard it, I could not believe. So I said I would come. So I have to say, way back then, the Pacific Islands were considered the end of the earth. It was. They were. And so we have to distinguish the difference in Sheba. So I want you now to join me in the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers. And we will read a few verses in the book of Numbers. The word is very clear here, what is going on, but we, as I indicated before, we have been prone to just listen to what people have told us rather than we reading for ourselves. And we must read for ourselves. This is Numbers chapter 24, verse 15. And he took up his parable. We're talking about Balaam here. He took up his parable and said, Balaam the son of Beor had said, and the man whose eyes are open had said. He had said, which heard the words of El and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision Almighty falling into a trance, but leaving his eyes open. I shall see him. This is Balaam speaking, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. There it is. This is the star. Balaam here in chapter 24, verse 17 of Numbers is prophesying it. And this is a star that the men, the wise men in Ophir saw and left their land and came to Jerusalem. And this is prophesied by Balaam. He said, I see a star. Are you with me? Out of Jacob, out of Jacob, and the scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy the children of Shet. Balaam said, I saw the star. Now, you've got to understand something. This is Old Testament. And he's looking into the New Testament. We talked about blindness last week, did we not? So Balaam here, we have long since considered him a false prophet. But here he is prophesying that the star is coming. And only the wise men from Ophir, from the Philippines, from the archipelago, saw him. And they came on a journey that took 2 years. They come to worship him at a time when Herod is in Jerusalem and Herod is trying to kill this child. And in a few weeks' time, we're going to have a whole host of people in churches singing all kinds of carols about this same child that received gifts from Ophir, from the Philippines, But they don't understand the history. They have not understood it because they have kept this from us. And when you read the document that they have in store, when you read it, the gentleman that I made reference to earlier, he quoted that's Fernandez. He quoted a document which he says they have, and he called it document number 98, and it is dated 1519-1522. This document is in Europe. I believe it's the Vatican has it. But it's number 98. And this is what he says. He said, if you're going to Ophir, this is how the mariners used to travel. He says, by traveling from Cape of Good Hope in Africa to India, to Burma, to Sumatra, to Moluccas, to Borneo, to Sulu, then finally Ophir facing the Pacific Ocean. He says that's the route that you took, that Solomon took. That's why it took so long. He said this is documented in the document number 98 that they have. The leaders have. Did they know this? And he stood up in his parliament in the Philippines, and he said this. Over 20 minutes he spoke. And he's now asking for the Philippines' name to be changed to Ophir to match that which we read in Genesis chapter 2, that land that has gold. That land. So it seems that how do we now reconcile this? That's been my struggle. If the Queen of Sheba is from Ophir in the Philippines, how is she claimed by Ethiopia to be the Queen of Ethiopia, the descendants of which are people like Haile Selassie? You see my struggle? One can only reconcile that as we know that Yemen claims the same thing too. But I know that Yemen and Ethiopia at one time was ruled by the same leader. So I have no problem with that. And so I might only be able to conclude that the Philippines, Ophir, or Ophir, was also a colony of Ethiopia at one time. Because when we go back and we read the book of Jubilee, we see exactly how the land was apportioned out to the people. It is interesting because if we hold to the view that the Philippines is indeed the land of Ophir where the gold is, which is at the end of the earth in the archipelago, and the distance alone gives the impression that's where it is. If that's the case, we're also saying that's where Adam lived. That's what we're saying. That's the Garden of Eden. So in our study today, we have created a desire for more study. Because when you trace this land, you have to conclude that it is David knew about it, Jeremiah knew about it, all the prophets knew about it, and they say that's where the gold is. And even Torbit is saying the gold that comes from this land is the gold that will furnish Jerusalem. David says that gold is good. It is good. So what do we do with what we know? What do we do with it? It's really amazing that these things could come up on us like this and unaware. Charles Thompson wrote, Ophir has been sought for almost in every part of the world and yet remains terra incognita, though one would hardly believe the discovery to be difficult concerning the various indices by which the scriptures seems to point out. The scripture points out where it is. So why are the scholars having all this kind of problem? How? How? Just common sense, though. If you leave Israel, Jerusalem, and you were to travel to Africa, it couldn't take you 2 years to go and come back, is it? Couldn't. Remember, Egypt is North Africa. It's walking distance. We're talking East Africa, but don't forget all of Africa at one time, inclusive of Central Africa. So it's not that far. So the scripture is shouting at us saying, this journey took 3 years. It had to be at the end of the earth, wherever that is. And the Bible says it's Ophir, Tarshish, Sheba, way down there where the family of Joktan lived, the descendant of Shem. It's neither hot nor cold. It's a mixture. Ham's land is hot. Japheth's land is cold. The rest is elementary, is it not? And so people have said, oh, this is in Arabia. And they have conjectured all kind of things. But it is coming. We're seeing that the scholars have shortchanged us. They have. Ophir, we know from scripture, it was the son of Joktan. Obvious. Descended from Shem. Hear me? Did they colonize all Africa? That's a question. The whole peninsula of Africa. That's the only way I can reconcile it. But I can't ignore what the scripture is trying to tell me. Not even trying, telling me. So at one time, Africa must have been part of that land. Because remember, these men, these three sons of Noah, were responsible for repeopling the earth after the flood. That's when the land was shared out. Oh, yes. And you know what's interesting? When we read Genesis and he said, yeah, take the dust of the earth and made man. There's a place, I think, in Ophir with the exact Hebrew name for dust. Interesting. Psalm 2 verse 8, ask of me, and I will give thee the eating for thine inheritance, and the uttermost part of the earth for thy possession. What? David says, I will give you the uttermost part of the earth for my possession. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Psalm 72 verse 8. Remember, Yeshua is talking about the ends of the earth. Now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. Micah 5:4. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn unto Yah. Psalm 22 verse 27. David is trying to tell us something. Who hath ascended into heaven? Who? Or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in its fist? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what it is his son's name, if thou can tell it? That's Proverbs 30, verse 4. That's Solomon saying the same thing as his father. He who both created and will ultimately regain all the ends of the earth will also be their judge. Yahweh shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king and exalt the horn of anointed. That's 1 Samuel 2 verse 10. For the present, however, he is still despised and rejected. And that's Isaiah verses 53 and verse 3. So Isaiah 45 and verse 22 says, the great message we carry from him is, look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. He's talking about a people that we have overlooked, that the world has overlooked. And so we need to pull back our own levers and relook at the word and see what it is that we're being told. Kamayana, that's frankincense. That's the word. The ointment. That many people will be singing in a few weeks' time, calling it Christmas. But as I indicated earlier, frankincense was not even mentioned during that period of time that Yeshua was born. This has become the pagan festival that many have participated in. Oh, yes. So let me just close again with Psalm 72. And begin in verse 10. Let the sovereigns of Tarshish and of the isles, we're talking about over 7,641 isles, grouped in three groups. He said, let all of them bring what? Presents. The sovereign of Sheba and Sheba offer gifts. And let all sovereigns bow down before him. All nations serve him. For he delivers the needy when he cries, and the poor who has no helper. This is it. They're coming from Tarshish, Sheba, and Ophir. Now, even Balaam understood this, and the scholars today don't understand it. David clearly understood it. Solomon understood it, because that's where Solomon got his wealth from. But it's interesting how Yah has preserved the wealth in the earth so that Columbus and others couldn't find it. But when the New Jerusalem comes, it will be found. It will furnish, says the prophet. Let him be blessed all day long. Let there be plenty of grain in the earth. On top of the mountain, let its fruits wave like Lebanon, and those of the city flourish like grass of the earth. May Yah cause us, by the inspiration of his word, to continue our study for those who have not yet found where Ophir is. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.